lecture 2, lecture 6, part 2. Moving on to recommendations for weight gain. We're going to talk about recommendations for weight gain and weight loss separately. Okay. So we talked about more of the physiological aspect of weight gain and weight loss. Here we're going to take those things and apply them to practical settings and make suggestions in terms of how you might be able to gain weight more optimally. So let's consider some factors that are involved in gaining weight. Okay. Obviously, no athletes try to gain fat when they attempt to gain weight. They want all their gain to be 100% muscle. But as we mentioned, that is a rare case. It's not always the case. Okay. Now, on top of that, considerably more research has been done on weight loss and weight gain. Okay, so we do know a little bit more about weight loss and weight gain. But there are some things that we know that are important. Okay, when you gain weight. Okay, one of those is calories, the energy, and the rate of gain. Okay, muscle to fat gain ratio, resistance training volume, protein amount, maybe macronutrient composition, and then maybe nutrient timing and meal frequency. Okay, so let's look at each of these things. Kcals and rate of gain. To gain weight, energy intake must exceed energy expenditure. We talked about this. Now, to gain a pound of weight, you need to be eating 3,500 extra kcals on top of the calories, on top of the kcals that you need to maintain your current body weight. Okay. So typically, 0.5 to 1 kilogram per week is a recommended rate of weight gain. Okay. Anything higher than this is more likely to result in greater fat gain than you want. Okay. Anything less than this is probably less likely to result in any weight gain. Okay. So usually when people try to gain weight, anywhere between 3,500 to 7,000 kcals per week divided over 7 days, so it's 500 to 1,000 kcals per day is the recommended guideline. Okay, so if you need 2,500 to maintain your body weight, then you need to be eating anywhere between 3,000 to 3,500 kcals per day. Okay, for 7 days to gain a pound of weight, or about half a kilo of weight per week. Okay, half a kilo to a kilo per week. So, how much muscle and fat gains are expected? We talked about how difficult it is to actually gain just muscle. Okay. But what would be expected if you do the right thing, if you do a good job of gaining weight? So how much gain weight will be muscle? Depends on many factors. You can see age, training age, history, responsiveness, resistance training volume, rate of gain, potentially a nutrient timing and a micronutrient composition. But generally, a muscle to fat gain ratio and the gain weight is greater when one has never lifted weights before and has a poor diet. So getting on a specially designed diet and you're studying to actually resistance training. In some lucky individuals, up to 100% of gain weight appears to be muscle. 100%. Okay. But in many cases, 100% muscle gain is unrealistic. And probably from the research what we can see is about 50 to 75% of gain weight being muscle is the most realistic goal. Okay, probably the most ideal realistic amount of gain if you do everything right. Okay, if you do things properly. Okay. Obviously, for this to happen, a proper diet and resistance training must take place. So, to put this in perspective, if one gains 10 pounds, about 5 to 7.5 pounds is likely to be muscle. Okay, so You need to actually keep track of your body composition and body weight daily, if not, well, at least daily body weight. If not, then once a week in terms of body composition, to make sure that you're headed in the right direction at the right rate. Not too fast, not too slow. We talked about BIA being not the best choice of best device of choice, especially the ones that are commercially available. There are some expensive ones that actually work fairly well, but the ones that you can actually get in a Walmart or Amazon or anywhere tends to be poor in quality. Okay? So probably the best recommended practical method is skin fold. Okay? If you don't know what these things are, here we are. We have a little picture. On the right side, we have BIA, bioelectrical impedance analysis. Okay. What this is that you hold the two handles, and from one end it will send a small electricity signal through your arm to the other end of to the other handle. So through the body, from, let's say you hold with both hands, and the device sends an electrical signal through the right arm, through the torso, okay, and through the left arm to the left handle. Then it basically it calculates the amount of electricity that's returned and determines the hydration status and body weight and all that stuff. So, but this is not the most accurate thing for various reasons. The best method is skin fold. Okay, this is very practical, but obviously this is not the most comfortable thing because you're gonna have somebody pinch your skin and fat and measure it, okay. And it gets in the spot like suprailiac, abdominal, a mid-axillary. Those positions are not most comfortable thing to do for me, but very practical and very reliable and fairly accurate. So resistance training, we talked about, it's very important. It must be conducted simultaneously to optimize the muscle to fat gain ratio. So if you say you want to gain muscle, if you say you want to gain weight, you need to be lifting weights, and obviously you need to be lifting weights more properly. How do we do that? Well, that's way beyond the scope of this class. You need to take classes like sports conditioning. But granted, you have designed the proper resistance training. If you can actually design a proper nutrition or diet, okay, you're more likely to optimize the amount of muscle gain and decrease the amount of fat gain. So, but I can make some general guidelines. Okay, so usually a higher volume is desirable. Okay. Not always. You don't want to do high volume all the time. You want to change it up, but you want to spend a good chunk of time, a good amount of time, doing high volume in resistance training. And what is high volume? Probably 25 reps, just to be general, to provide some guidelines. Okay, it's not hard and fast. Okay, but just to provide some guidelines, a total of 25 reps or more per exercise, broken down into 5-10 reps per set, for as many sets as you need to actually achieve the total number of reps, is probably is reasonably high volume. Okay. Now, for the same volume load, the heavier the load, the greater muscle hypertrophy is. So, if you're doing 25 reps, doing sets of 5 repetitions compared to, let's say, what would be good? A 2.5 sets of 10 repetitions, which really doesn't really happen. But if you do that, 5 and 5 is more likely to result in a greater a muscle gain than probably a 2.5 times 10. But the amount of weight is important. If it's not, then you can do your body weight squat for 10,000 times. get really sore and you can get bigger. But that's not the case. You can run a marathon and you can get bigger, get really sore, and you expect to get bigger, but that's not the case. So you have to be attention to the amount of weight you lift and the amount of work you accomplish. Okay. Now, from the feasibility standpoint, anywhere between 5 to 10 reps is probably a reasonable repetition range to do. And you just need to do as many sets as you need to accomplish the total number of repetitions with sufficient amount of weight. Okay. Also, an exercise performed with a full range of motion is probably a better choice than a limited range of motion. So if you're squatting, you squat all the way down till your butt is on the calves, all the way down. Okay. Not that like 90-degree knee angle squat, not like a little squat. Those things don't really change much. I mean, better than nothing certainly, but you wouldn't expect as big an effect. You wouldn't get as much out of an exercise each repetition as you would from full squat. Now, obviously, there's misconception, which almost is becoming an ancient myth, that the deep squat is bad for your knees. This is really not the case if you do the squat properly. Okay, this is necessary. This is absolutely not the case. Okay, so, full range of motion exercise is highly recommended. If you don't know how, if you don't know proper technique of full squatting, then you probably just talk to a person that actually is qualified to do so. Okay. Protein amount. So we talked about this in the previous lecture, but 1.2 to 2.2 kilograms per kilogram body weight per day is a good recommendation for hypertrophy. Okay. Now, obviously, as the volume load increases, as the volume of work in the weight room increases, you need to increase your protein intake. Okay. Now, also to ensure maximum protein synthesis rate, 25 grams or more of high-quality protein should be consumed. Okay. As long as the total caloric intake does not, total energy intake does not exceed 500 to 10,000 kcals per day. So we talked about anything beyond 25 grams may or may not be of as much benefit because extra protein may be oxidized, but also we have evidence to suggest that it's the total amount of protein that you ingest that makes the greatest difference. Next one down is probably the amount per meal. So it is more ideal to actually take 25 grams and about 25 grams. In each meal, but certainly when you get to a certain grams of protein, that's very hard to do. Okay, but try to, if it's possible, and try to actually limit the amount of protein up to 25 grams. Okay. Macronutrient composition, as we said earlier, this is much of a debate deal in the scientific community. But we can say some things about this. One, the protein amount takes precedence over the others. Okay. So intake per meal per day must be sufficient. That's the first thing you need to pay attention to. Okay. A sufficient amount of carbohydrate must be ingested to replenish muscle glycogen after training. Okay. Otherwise, if you're doing high volume, you can run out of glycogen and your training quality goes down. And guess what happens? Then you won't get as much muscle and hypertrophy as you should because your training quality is down. So you need to support your training. You need to provide energy for training. Okay. Now, some individuals may gain more fat from excess carbohydrate than muscle. Okay. May. Okay. And this is especially the case if excess carbohydrate is ingested. Okay. If that's the case, we can replace kcals from unnecessary carbohydrate with fat. Okay. But again, this point has not been a purely a I guess agreed upon among a scientific community members. But due to health concerns, you should avoid high GI carbohydrate outside of your training time. Immediately during, immediately after, and fast recovery. Those are the times you can actually ingest high carbohydrate, but high GI carbohydrate. But outside that, it's like already 5 hours after training, and you try to have a meal. You probably should stick with low GI food. If you don't have a choice, take it with fiber, protein, fat, and those things will slow down gastric emptying rate. Also, have some absorption and then reduce the glycemic index of the carbohydrate. And the last point is fat is a great source of kcals. When you're gaining weight, fat is awesome because you get to a point where you're just stuffed with food. And if you stick with, something like fruits, carbohydrates like bread, pasta, rice, and potatoes, all they do contain a lot of carbohydrates and therefore a good amount of calories. They can really fill you up. And because fat has twice more calories per gram, that if you need to add more calories, simply fat is a great way to do it. One thing to remember is to try to avoid excessive saturated fatty acids, because there's some kind of arguments that are coming up right now to where, saturated fatty acids may not be as bad as we thought it was, but still, I think this point should be treated carefully. Macronutrient composition. So, when deciding how much of each macronutrient to eat within a specified kcals per day, follow the following step sequence below. 1. Determine the total amount of protein per day and divide it by the number of meals. Okay. So if it's 2.2 grams per kilograms per day, you're going to take that. So let's say, for example, you have a athlete that weighs 100 kilograms. Okay. You're going to multiply 100 kilograms by 2.2, so you get 220 grams per day. If you're going to ingest 6 meals per day, then you need to divide it 220 by 6, which is about 3, between 3 and 4. And so that's what happens. If you need to eat more than that, you can certainly ingest more than that too. Okay. It's not, obviously, there's a concern of wasting protein, but then more protein does not seem to hurt as long as you meet the caloric calorie goals, kcal goals, energy intake goals. And 2, determine the total amount of carbohydrate per day. Okay, 5 to 7 grams per kilograms per day is a good start. A good start. You have to start there and then make modifications as you go, as you see necessary. On a non-exercise day, maybe you can ingest more carbohydrate earlier in the day and taper towards the end. Although there is a little bit of a concern, and still this is not really supported by the evidence, but ingesting carbohydrate early in the day and taper towards the end might work a little better in terms of reducing the fat gain. There are some concerns still in terms of gaining fat, eating carbohydrates late at night, right before you go to bed and all that. So, but no non-exercise day, 1 to 5 grams per kilograms per day might be a good start also. Okay, so adjust these carbohydrate amount according to the needs and sensitivity of an athlete. Okay. For the most part, this should do it. Okay. In step 3, fill in the rest of the energy intake needed to reach 500 and 1,000 extra kcals per day with fat. Try to avoid saturated fat. Go with MUFAs and PUFAs. Nutrient timing. So almost all nutrient timing recommendations have been made in the previous lectures, 2 to 5. But here's one thing that we have not talked about is that you might be helpful to avoid ingesting carbohydrate 1 to 2 hours before you go to bed. Now there is again a lack of evidence supporting this strongly, but there's still a concern that if you ingest carbohydrate in this time window, you might actually increase insulin in the blood when you're going to sleep and while you're sleeping, and because your caloric expenditure is so low that you might end up gaining a little bit more fat than you want to. But again, like I said, the evidence is lacking, and there's some research suggestion that it just does not make a difference. It's the calories. So that's just how strong calories is as a modulator of body weight. On the other hand, ingesting unsaturated fats and or slow, high quality protein like casein before bed might actually help those who are struggling to gain weight. Okay. If you think about how long you go without eating when you go to bed at night, 8 to 7 hours, if you can actually provide energy during that time period so your body does not tap into the storage of protein and carbohydrate and fat, basically they're breaking down those things to stay alive. If you can actually provide nutrients through food while you're sleeping, then you might be able to actually do a better job of gaining weight. So meal frequency. Okay. I think we talked about this. For the sake of this class, any ingestion of energy is a meal. Okay, whether it's a protein shake or a bar or whatever, it's a meal. Okay. Meal frequency of 3 to 6 times a day seems to help ingest more energy. Okay. Now, whether or not this actually frequent meal helps with better composition is still under debate, and there's just not a strong evidence suggesting that. And it might make a difference in some people, it might not in other people. So it's just one of those deals where you just don't know for sure. But certainly, you can ingest more calories, right? I mean, there's only so much food you can eat in one meal. If you can have multiple meals with a little less or same calories, then you can ingest more calories per day and you can gain more weight. So for those who are struggling to gain weight, this is a good strategy. Eat more often. Okay. And frequent meals also help supply amino acids constantly. Okay. We talked about protein synthesis is not just a 1 second deal, 1 minute deal, 1 hour deal. Okay. It's like on constantly. Okay. If you can provide amino acids constantly, which you can support protein synthesis with, then a net effect should be a greater muscle gain. So that way you can actually gain more muscle than fat, hopefully. So here's an overview of example weight gain. So you can see on the bottom axis time in weeks, up here on the left, energy intake in kcals, and here's the body weight, okay? So the blue line here is body weight changes, and the red line here is energy intake. You can see that you started gaining weight, and so you slowly gain weight. Let's say this is 0.5 to a kilogram per week. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, while you're at the same caloric intake, okay? And then you get to a point where your weight stalls. Oops, I haven't gained weight for a week. Well, I need to do something about it. So you bump up your calories more by 500 to 1,000 kcals per day. Okay. Then you start gaining weight again. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Okay. Again, same kcals. You don't really change anything. But then, boom, your weight stalls. Oops. Well, let's bump it up some more. Gain some weight. Okay. Basically, you repeat this. That's what you do when you gain weight. Now, the whole body composition thing and cutting weight and everything, losing weight and everything is not this simple, but just that phase of gaining weight. This is basically what happens. All right, so moving on to recommendations for weight loss. This may be of a topic of interest for more people than weight gain. So let's see what we can say about this. So factors to consider losing weight. Okay, obviously, typical goal of weight loss is to lose fat and maintain or gain muscle. Again, that is not necessarily realistic, and it is a really rare case. It could happen, but it is rare. In many cases, when you lose weight, you lose muscle, but you lose fat, but you also lose muscle. It's hard to maintain. But to improve body composition, when you're already carrying some fat and all that, to improve body composition, and you've been lifting weights and being active, probably the only way is to actually lose weight. There's just probably no other ways to do it. You can't simply maintain your calories and expect to lose just fat, okay, and gain weight and then maintain body weight. Unless you're someone who's really sensitive to carbohydrate intake, and then micronutrient composition might make a little difference. But for the most part, for losing weight is the best way to go. But when you do that, consider the following: losing weight, rate of loss, protein intake, resistance training, micronutrient composition, nutrient timing and meal frequency, constant versus intermittent caloric restriction, and refeeding. So let's start with rate of loss, okay? So just like weight gain, too high a rate of loss has detrimental effects. That means that you lose more muscle than you want to. The goal is to maintain as much muscle as possible and lose fat. And so your body weight is down, and you're leaner and muscular, all that stuff. How can we make that happen? The one thing is the rate of loss. And so, let's see. If muscle is lost, then expected. If more muscle is lost than expected, the best scenario, obviously, is to lose weight and maintain muscle. But if regain is to occur after loss, it is more likely that the individual will end up with higher body fat percentage and a heavier weight. Alright, so the first thing we consider is rate of weight loss. Okay, just like a weight gain, too high a rate of weight loss has a detrimental effects. Okay? If you lose too fast, you lose too much muscle, and that's not the good thing to do. Okay? On top of that, if you fail to maintain and regain is to occur after loss, it is more likely that the individual, basically you will end up with higher body fat percentage and a heavier weight. So more muscle lost means longer period of hyperphagia and a greater chance of fatter regain. Okay, so you just have to be careful with that. You can also be careful with dehydration, because to lose a lot of weight, people often just completely dehydrate themselves in a short period of time. You can actually lose quite a bit of weight by this way, but if you dehydrate yourself, your performance go down. Even the moderate dehydration, severe dehydration can obviously lead to death if it's really bad. So, what is the optimal rate of loss? From the research, as far as we can tell, 0.5 to a kilogram per week, or 0.1 to 1% per week. This seems to be a little bit of recommendations, but seems to be the best rate of loss. Seems to minimize the loss. Anything less than this is going to be no loss. Anything more than this, you're going to lose more muscle. Okay. But either way, typically an energy deficit of 500 kcal per day per week appears to be the optimal rate of loss to minimize muscle. So for a week, a total of 3,500 kcals deficit is the goal. So these are just two tables out of a study that I thought that people got really lucky, in that if you look over here up here, this is energy nutrition variables presented as mean plus or minus standard deviations for diet registration and meal plan. Okay, so up here, here's the slow rate weight loss group. Here's the fast rate weight loss group. And you can see there's energy intake and energy, all that. This slow rate had a deficiency of about 470 kcals per day. Fast group had about 800 kcals per day. And here's the bottom of the table of what happened after a period of being on a diet. So slow rate weight loss group, look at this. Body weight change, lost about 4.2 kilograms. Lean body mass somehow increased by a kilo. Okay, now is this an increase? Maybe, hard to say. But, well, if it actually is an increase, that's great. Fat mass lost a lot. Kind of movement jumps improved. 40 meter sprint improved. One arm press improved. Pull improved. Squat improved. Everything improved. Awesome. Fast weight loss class, we saw the very similar things except the jumps and the sprints. Okay. But the major difference is that they lost about the same weight. Okay. By the way, this fast weight loss group lost the same amount of weight in a shorter period of time compared to the other group. The other group took longer. Okay. So they lost the same amount of weight, but they lost a bit of the muscle, more like maintain. Okay. They lost less fat mass and all that stuff. Okay. So in this case, they got really lucky that they were able to maintain or gain, in some cases, some muscle or lean body mass. But if you compare the two, you can see that it's probably better to go about 500 kcals per day per week to lose weight. Protein intake and resistance training volume. Okay, so how much protein? How much lifting? Okay. Well, protein intake actually for recommendation actually increases from weight gain. You need more protein than when you gain weight. Why is that? Because you got a greater risk of actually losing muscle. And research says, research suggests a greater protein intake. Okay. So 1.8 to 3.1 grams per kilograms per day, as we suggested earlier in the previous lecture, is a good thing to recommend. Obviously, resistance training is necessarily, and then recommendations that are basically the same as for the weight gain. You just have to be careful with doing high volume under fatigue and losing weight, because there is a greater chance of injuries. Also, greater protein intake helps in terms of satiety. Protein actually is a strong stimulator for satiety. It will make you feel full, okay, more than any other macronutrients. So this is a great thing to take. Macronutrient composition. Again, this is a controversy, and I don't think we have an answer for either side anyway. Okay. However, we probably know that this is rather a minor factor compared to other things like resistance training, calories, kcals, and protein intake. In addition to that, let's consider some things, okay, in the controversy. So, ketogenic diet is a term often used to describe a diet that is very low in carbohydrate, practically no carbohydrate. Okay. A low carbohydrate diet is distinguished from the above, from the ketogenic diet, in that it actually has a little bit more carbohydrate. Okay? Ketogenic diet is often a very low carbohydrate diet. Okay? A diet that is typically compared to ketogenic or low carbohydrate diet is low fat diet. Okay? Also, a high protein diet has been receiving attention due to protein's a potent ability to increase satiety. We mentioned this already. So considering all these things, which diet works well? Okay. Some evidence suggests that ketogenic diet might be effective in losing weight. But, I mean, there is other evidence suggesting that, well, as long as the calories are the same, the difference may not be even there, or even if there is, it may be small. There are some other studies suggesting that, okay, well, you can just not eat carbohydrate, and that alone might improve the body compositions. Okay. But obviously, considering what athletes have to go through, elimination of carbohydrate is probably not the best option. Okay. at the expense of, potentially, even if you get a body composition, at the expense of that and a better body weight, even if it happens, not sure if it happens, but if it does, at the expense of all those things, you're going to experience more fatigue, lower cognitive function, and lower muscle glycogen depletion. That means lack of boost for performance and training quality, and either no gain in fitness or maybe loss of fitness. So this is not really a good situation. It kind of defeats the whole purpose, right? Right. You're training hard, you're working hard, and you're doing everything, but then somehow you can't really like perform well. If sport nutrition is supposed to help with that, so it defeats the whole purpose of sport nutrition. So the major concern in sports is carbohydrate and protein intakes when losing weight. Carbohydrate is a performance booster. Protein intake must be kept up high to retain muscle. So the best diet is probably one that is actually designed for specific needs of an athlete. How sensitive is an athlete to carbohydrate, if there's such thing as that? Okay. How much weight is an athlete losing? How hard? How long has this person been losing weight? How big this person is? What are their training? What's their training schedule? What are they doing in their practice? All of the things are going to influence. So general guidelines here for losing weight. Specific examples diets will be discussed in a later lecture. Okay. So here's just the general ones. In general, the protein intake should be 1.8 to 3.1 grams per kilogram per day. We talked about this. If it's a per lean body mass, you can go 2.3 to 3.1, but obviously you're going to have this estimate unless you can actually get a good idea of what your percent body fat is. For fat, 15 to 30% of total energy intake, and a carbohydrate will fill in the remaining calories, remaining energy intake. Now, you probably noticed that the recommendations between fat and carbohydrate has kind of flipped from gaining weight. In gaining weight, we recommended protein, and then we recommended a certain carbohydrate amount, and then we said that fill the remaining with fat. Okay, but in this case, it's opposite. Reason being is that fat is basically, some of the fatty acids are basically essential nutrients. You have to have some fats in your diet to be healthy and to stay alive. And so that's just one thing you can't compromise. And in many cases, if you leave the fat to fill in the remaining of the total energy intake, what might happen is that an athlete eats so little fat and they may not produce the best outcome. Okay. So from the health concern, it is important that you maintain a fat intake and fill in the remaining with the carbohydrate as needed. Okay. If it's a sensitive person, then concentrate your carbohydrate intake around your workout window. Okay. And then fill in and then complete your 15 to 30% of total energy intake. And if you still need some more calories, then add a little bit more fat to make sure that you're not losing weight too fast. Okay. And also, if you follow the general guidelines, you're still struggling to lose weight. Okay. Well then, to lose weight even more, if you have to deviate from general guidelines, is you need to be careful with some things. One is to maintain or increase protein intake. Like I said, the protein is really good with satiety, but also every time you try to lose more weight, you are at a greater catabolic state, and so increasing protein intake help to retain or reduce the loss of muscle. You can reduce the total carbohydrate intake, but be really careful with that and concentrate on an exercise window or workout window. And then, like I said, be really careful with reducing fat intake. So nutrient timing and meal frequency. The basic recommendations from previous lectures apply to weight loss as well. Okay, but for those who are sensitive to carbohydrate, concentrating intake around exercise and avoiding carbohydrate might produce better results. Okay. Meal frequency is exactly the same as for weight gain, but not to ingest more calories, but to maintain a level of amino acid in the blood. Okay, amino acids in the blood, and to reduce hunger. Okay, if you go too long without eating, obviously you're gonna feel hungry. If you do, and if you eat so little food, then you're gonna be really hungry. You feel like you want to eat more, and so it just becomes more stressful. Other techniques: constant versus intermittent caloric restriction. Constant caloric restriction is basically you are at a deficit every day. Intermittent means that periodically you have a day where you are isocaloric, means that you are eating to maintain basically, or in a slight positive balance, like slight. Okay. So you try to lose weight, you have a deficit, you're at a deficit every other day, and the remainder of the week, you're not. We need a lot more research for this, and so it is hard to make solid recommendations, but from limited evidence, it seems that an intermittent schedule is just as effective in losing weight, or maybe more effective in retaining muscle. Okay, maybe because you actually have a break during the week where you don't really try to lose weight, and that might actually help to reestablish hormones or retain the muscle. But again, we need more research. This is kind of like, okay, well, maybe. Refeeding. Okay. Some people do something called a cheat meal. This is kind of along the same line, but refeeding is a day that occurs maybe once or twice a week, or you can just eat. Okay, you're not losing weight that day. Obviously, you're not like eating as much as you can, but you're eating isocaloric or a positive caloric diet, so that day you're not losing weight. Okay. And usually this is accomplished by increasing carbohydrate intake. Okay. So this is hypothesized to increase leptin levels and resting metabolic rate. Okay. But there is even less research on this than intermittent caloric restriction, that it's kind of hard to make recommendations. But one thing for sure is that when you have a day like this in a week, and you're for the rest of the time you're dieting, losing weight, and training hard, a day like this is going to be able to replenish your muscle and liver glycogen. Okay. We do know that if you have 24 hours, right, you can do that. We talked about how 8 hours is a good guideline. So that's plenty of time to actually replenish your muscle glycogen and your liver glycogen. And this might, we don't know yet, but might reestablish or alter hormonal levels towards the original state. Okay. So it might be a good thing to do. Now, we talked about body weight gain and body weight loss, and we mentioned how KCAL's energy intake is something that is a major determinant. For you to actually do this practically, you need to estimate your energy expenditure. Okay? Because to maintain, you need to eat. Your energy intake needs to be the same as energy expenditure. To lose, your energy intake must be a less than energy expenditure. To gain, the opposite. Okay? So how can we do that? Now, there are some estimation equations available, but I mean, it's just everybody does different things, right? Everybody has his own bodies, and especially athletes, they're unique. And football players don't necessarily do the same thing as softball players and weightlifters, and so it is very difficult to use these estimation equations. Okay. For the best method is to estimate your energy intake from food. So while you're not losing weight, you log your food count, calories, kcals, and estimate how much you weigh. Okay, so average over a week, and if your weight practically did not change much over the week, then that's probably as much as you're eating. Okay, and you can also have a log of what you eat over a week. Okay, and so you're gonna start getting an idea of, okay, well, to lose weight. Right now, I eat 300 grams, 400 grams of rice per day, and that equates to X amount of calories. I need to drop by this much, and so I need to cut out this much amount of rice, this much amount of butter, this much amount of whatever. Okay, and so you can, because you actually have an idea of what you eat, you're setting up your diet. It becomes much easier that way. So estimation is typically done by looking up kcals of a food. You can Google it. You see on the right side, and there's the nutrition facts. This is basically me Googling avocados, and that's what you get. So looking at this, if you eat half an avocado, you will ingest about 160 kcals. You can also estimate that your fat intake is about 15 grams, with 2.2 grams saturated fat, 1.3 grams of PUFAs, and 10 grams of MUFAs. Okay? You also ingest 7 grams of fiber and 1.5 grams of carbohydrate with 2 grams of protein. Okay, so you can see avocado is primarily fat. Okay? But you can make this up estimations. Awesome. Okay. So easiest way to find a food's nutrient facts is Google. Okay, you just in the Google, put avocado and nutrition facts, type in 3 things, and it'll pop up. You can also use a app or softwares that are available that actually allow you to log your food. Okay? Just by putting in a food in, okay, an amount of that food, it will determine the amount of carbohydrates, amount of fat, amount of protein you ingested from each food per day, per meal, and in calories, all that stuff. Okay. One app that is convenient right now is called the FitnessPal. Okay. This is very convenient, and once you get in the initially logging is a little pain in the butt, but once you get in the rhythm, you started putting the same weight over and over again, same food over and over again, because obviously, if you don't like fish, you don't eat fish. And there are some foods that you eat more on a regular basis. There are some occasions where you eat something different, but how many days out of so many days do you actually do that? So once you get used to it, it becomes really easy, and this becomes a really good way of actually doing a diet. But anyway, here's an overview of example weight loss. Okay, so same thing here. You have week, you have time, you have energy intake, you have body weight right here. Okay, up here that's body weight. Down here, this is a calories. So it's the same deal. You drop your calories, you lose weight, and your weight loss stalls. Okay? While this time you're at the same caloric deficit. And because it stalls for a week, you decided to drop the calories by about 250 to 500 kcal per day, and you start losing weight again. It stalls, drop again, same amount. Okay? Lose, stall, hold it, lose, and then if it stalls, drop again. Repeat it. If you look, this is a gross view. So if you look at a level that's close, so if you zoom in, you might be able to see 2 different patterns. You might actually see intermittent restriction, where you get a low calorie and then a little higher calorie here. Lower calorie, a little higher calorie here. Lower calorie, a little higher calorie here. Okay. This is probably less stressful. At least every 2-3 days you get to eat something, and so you're not like constantly losing weight, and that's definitely less stressful. Might allow you to replenish glycogen better. Okay. Or here you might actually have a refeeding. Okay. So you go for a little while and you have a refeeding day. Another while you have a refeeding day. Okay. So something you can do. So summary, in many sports, heavier body weight and or leaner body composition are desirable. Body weight is determined by energy balance. To optimize muscle gain during weight gain, it is important to conduct resistance training, increase protein intake, and then be in a positive energy balance. To lose weight with minimum muscle loss, it is important to conduct resistance training, increase protein intake, and then be in a negative energy balance. It is a rare case to have 100% of weight gain as muscle gain. Usually 50 to 75% of weight gain as muscle gain is the most, it's the best you can do. It is difficult to determine whether carbohydrate does make one fatter even for the same calories compared to fat. In fact, there is probably, I would say, more evidence suggesting that is not the case. However, there may be some people that are more sensitive, and this might be true. Okay? For the most part, it is unlikely. Weight cycling refers to a cycle of losing and regaining weight. Weight cycling with 7.5% change appears to have a very small negative effect on body composition and weight if you stay active. But weight cycling with greater change appears to induce overshooting of body weight with more fat. Okay? We talked about the hypothesis. Okay? And eating disorder is a major concern if suspected. Okay? If you suspect, seek out for professional help. To gain weight and minimize fat gain, and to lose weight and minimize muscle loss, the rate of gain, resistance training, volume, and protein intake are major factors. For both weight gain and loss, slow change is recommended. Protein intake should be also higher. Resistance training volume should be moderate, high during weight gain and loss. It is important to actually remember that a high volume during weight loss increases risks of injuries, and thus caution must be exercised.